Hi, my name's Terry Rich. Thanks for joining me for my talk today. I became interested in what bird watchers, birders do for bird conservation a long time ago, and I decided to go back to school and study it. My premise is that there's a serious disconnect between birder interest, the needs for bird conservation in the U.S., and the public policies for bird conservation. By public policies, I mean those policies by the 50 state wildlife agencies and the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service at the federal level. I saw, after working for decades in bird conservation and land management, that the scientific foundation for bird conservation was really good. The bird conservation initiatives, science was bringing a lot of good information to public policymakers, but the public interest in birds didn't seem to be getting translated up into the policy. There didn't seem to be a real effect or an interaction there. And as a result, we were struggling literally decade after decade with insufficient money, insufficient people, and other insufficient resources. By the scientific foundation, I mean the information that's been brought to bear from the many bird conservation initiatives, the Partners in Flight, the North American Waterfowl Management Plan, and others that I'll show you in a second. The scientific working groups and management working groups have been putting together a almost endless variety of detailed plans and strategy documents, prioritization plans that show where, what species, and where on the map and what we should be doing for various species. So a very robust scientific foundation. Through all this, we've learned and decided that something like 22% of the species in North America or in the US need conservation attention. So the need is very big and very real. Another part of this puzzle, the third part, are the birders out there. This survey that came out in 2016 estimated there's about 45 million Americans who feed or watch birds. And this is roughly the same number that was found in the survey 5 or 6 years prior to this one. So I decided to see if I could learn what birders are thinking and what they're doing and what they know. So I designed my PhD research to look into this. The theoretical model behind my research design is the cognitive hierarchy from Vasky and Donnelly. I have expanded their hierarchy somewhat to explicitly identify factors that they sort of implicitly identified. So you can see if you go up through the arrows that everything that people do starts with some basic values, and these are very few and hard to change. You can't, you're not going to get very far if you're trying to change people's basic values. That's a tough one. But as you go up through the steps and you get ever closer to taking a particular behavior, taking a particular action, you have more and more opportunities to understand and to get involved in what the ultimate behavior will be. And of course, information sources, social interaction, childhood experiences in some cases, norm activation, that's the place where some person, perhaps yourself, perhaps someone else, really has a big impact on what you decide to do. So that's a factor. All these things have been very widely studied in the social sciences. Really, if you can, everybody wants to be able to understand and predict human behavior. You can imagine the advantages of that. So my methods were first to do an online survey of birders in all 50 states. I identified 24 independent variables. I'll show you some of those. I had 19 dependent variables, and these are actions that people either did or did not take in the previous 12 months. Contacted 285 groups across the 50 states and got back 5,502 surveys that were complete enough to be useful. My response rate, which is always something people always want to know in social science research, my response rate is obviously quite low if you assume there are 45 million birders, but I'll show you some evidence. I think I got a pretty good representative sample of those people. So I'm pretty comfortable with the results, even with that sort of a low response rate. The results might be biased toward people who actually do take conservation action. I can't quite decipher that, but that's okay. That's actually the people I'm interested in anyway. So the survey was designed by me in Qualtrics and delivered in Qualtrics. The data go very nicely into Excel, so you can look for outliers and do data coding and that sort of thing. And then I used SPSS with 2 optional plugins to do the analyses. All my significant levels are set at 0.01. I could actually go to 0.001 and very few things would change due to the large sample sizes. The results are actually pretty robust. So here are the independent variables in a summary form. I have 4 questions about birding interest and intensity. I have 1 question about childhood experience with nature, 1 question about important people during childhood, 3 general attitudes and values, 4 about the respondents' knowledge of bird conservation and where they get their information. I had 1 question about actions they intended to take but didn't take, 1 about norm activation, again, who is it that sort of really set you off to take a particular action, and then 9 questions about demographics, and these are very standard in the social sciences, and I just pulled out what everybody else uses to make the results comparable with other studies. So a few of the results, this is just the tip of the iceberg. This is the age distribution. You can see that it is skewed older. The conventional wisdom is that birders are old. Well, they're certainly aging. But even with a mean of about 64, you can see I got a lot of responses from younger people all the way down to about age 8. So I feel pretty good about the age balance in the response. Females responded 57%, or I should say 57% of the responses were from females and 41% from males. This is very typical in surveys of any sort. Females are more responsive. So do with that what you will. Political spectrum results were very fascinating. This question allowed people to pick whether they were very conservative, which was 0, or very liberal, which was 100. And you can see the huge spike of 800 respondents who just said, I'm very liberal. And the sample obviously skews very liberal. It's clear up there, 88 or something like that. But once again, as with age, we've got at least some representation from various conservative categories all the way down to very conservative. If you look at the birding interest variables, here the mean days per month that the people went birding at least 1 hour away from home. The mean doesn't matter so much, but the range is instructive, I think, all the way from none to 31. So you had people that never do this up to people who do it every single day. Species on the life list, similar sort of spread. Reporting from 1 to over 10,000 species on their life list. I honestly don't believe either one of those numbers, but once again, the spread is pretty broad. And if you look at the mean there, 783, obviously people can't get that kind of number unless they leave the United States. And in fact, leave at least get to Mexico. You'll never get that number otherwise. The maximum number of feeders in your yard at any one time, that was open-ended, all the way from no feeders to 50 feeders. Again, a tremendous spread of interest there. And then how many types of bird lists you maintain, a year list, a yard list, a life list, whatever. From no listing to 6, keeping all of the sorts of lists that I offered. The mean of 2 shows that these people are by and large are not big hardcore listers. When it comes to childhood experiences that were important in shaping your attitude toward nature, outdoor play, you can see 68% said that was very important to shaping their attitude toward nature. Vacations to outdoor locations were second. Reading about nature, surprisingly high. I did not expect to see that, and you can see the other numbers down through there. Note that social media obviously was not available to a lot of the population when they were 11 or younger, so that's not surprising that number is so small. The importance of people during childhood, I was really surprised to see that the very important ranking was so low, even for father and mother. I mean, just not what I expected at all. And a teacher, only 12% said that a teacher was very important during their childhood in shaping their attitude towards nature. And you can see from most of the categories, the not important score actually exceeded the very important score. So this just did not show up anywhere near as important as I thought it was going to. Familiarity with bird conservation initiatives, I was very dismayed to see these numbers. So for example, 41.1% of the respondents were not familiar with Partners in Flight. Partners in Flight celebrated its 30th anniversary last year. So it's like we haven't been doing nearly enough communication outreach, but it's the same for everybody else. You look at State Wildlife Action Plan, North American Waterfowl Management Plan, State of the Birds reports, joint ventures, there's a huge percentage of people that just don't know what we're doing. One of the knowledge questions I asked them was about the importance of different sources of bird mortality. If you look at the middle column, that's the judged importance. That is, how did the respondents score it? They scored every source of bird mortality as very important. So this gives us a big opportunity to make some distinctions. For example, illegal shooting, it's important for a few species in a few locations, very sort of a minor impact by and large, compared to cat predation or collisions with windows. Enormous opportunity to clarify people's thinking, get them to take some actions that maybe they wouldn't otherwise take. So who influences your decision when you finally do something? Unfortunately, most people, 65%, said it was my own sense of what's right. That's a tough one because that's all tied up in values. And as I said before, it's a hard one to analyze and it's a hard one to change. More helpful really is the second one, that messages from conservation organizations were scored as important by 24% of the respondents. So these messages are having an effect on what people do. Unfortunately, state wildlife agencies and the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service are having a 5% effect on people's decisions. So that's a terrible score, but again, it's an opportunity for these agencies to do more. Looking quickly at some of the conservation actions, so you can see what these dependent variables were. The number one thing that people said they'd do was made their yard more desirable for birds. And this has been a push from Audubon and others for a long time now. It's something that, a lot of people can do. It's really within their control. And I was happy to see this response because we can really work with this connection. Second, renewed memberships in conservation organizations, shared content on social media. That 67%, that's pretty good given the older skew of the population. So again, I think there's a really good opportunity to take advantage of social media to communicate more bird conservation. Looking at then the next 9, going down the line to things that are done a little bit less often, you can see their numbers for wrote emails, voted in a particular way, made presentations, led bird walks, and so on. The last thing on the list, the lowest thing, wrote editorials to a newspaper, articles for a magazine, or blogs, only 14%, so they do that. And I think, this is a very personal thing. Well, these are all personal things, but this is one of those things that probably a lot more people could do if they were sort of egged on a little bit by a friend or a neighbor or a spouse to, share what they know and share what they think. So if we get down to then the analysis and the actual regression equations, so for each one of those, I ran a simple binary logistic regression, trying to use all those independent variables to predict whether a birder did or did not do one of these actions. This is just a summary of how many times different sorts of variables entered these equations. So you can see, for example, birding interest and intensity were significant predictors of behavior 24 times. So this is good. It shows that people who are birding, who care about birding, are also taking some actions. That's good. Childhood experiences with nature only entered 1 time in 1 equation. So despite this ranking of the importance of outdoor play and vacations, that is not showing up as causal to bird conservation behaviors. And important people in childhood, maybe not surprisingly, was never a factor in one of the equations. Now, maybe the way I asked it or measured it, but that was a big nothing right there. You can see the others there. Knowledge of bird conservation entered 16 times. That's good because we can affect knowledge. Information sources, that's good. We need to know where people are getting their information. We can work with that. And demographics is always a big player with education and income especially being important. So some preliminary conclusions. The survey captured a wide variety of birders. We tend strongly liberal. Childhood experiences don't seem to be important. Gender differences are huge. I didn't even get to touch on those. Having knowledge of bird conservation was important, but it was the messages from bird conservation organizations, not public agencies, that were having the effect. So I think the conclusion for me is that bird conservation initiatives need to spend more time working directly with birders and committing directly to birders to get more conservation action.